Hey everybody, back for the final video in my Oath of the Gatewatch review. I appreciate you guys watching, and we're going to be looking at the gold cards, so there aren't going to be as many this time. I think overall there's 10, 11, 12, 13. There's one for each color combination, and then there are 3 legendary creatures that got gold cards this time around. They're all very exciting, very good, and as far as Limited's concerned, there are very few of them that I would play, if any, that I would not play in their own respective colors. Gold cards are usually pushed to a different power level just because they're slightly harder to cast, but all in all, they're not too hard to cast, and they're definitely worth taking. They're also usually a good sign that a color combination is open if you're getting them a little late in the pack, and I think that's going to be true for most of them here. But we're going to start out with what I think is the most exciting on the list, because it probably has the highest likelihood that it's going to get played outside of Limited. This is Reflector Mage. It's Azorius color, so blue, white, and 1 for a 2/3. Notice how I mentioned there are a lot of 2/3s in this format and 3/2s. You're gonna see a couple of those here. But Reflector Mage says when it enters the battlefield, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. That creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn. So basically it bounces a creature and then it prevents your opponent from playing the same creature on their following turn. It lasts until your next turn. One thing it doesn't do is it doesn't bounce your own creature, so there are sometimes some weird strategies you can do where you're bouncing your own stuff, getting another ETB trigger. But Reflector Mage is absolutely amazing even without that. Just sometimes You use a creature like this and you bounce something and they just replay it in the next turn, or they'll play something else. There's going to be a lot of situations where you bounce a creature and they just play something else instead, but every now and then you're going to get a chance to bounce a creature and then your opponent's just going to have to pass back without doing anything because they have another creature, or the only creature they can cast is that same card. So this seems amazing, and these type of cards are always good anyway just because they put you ahead while putting your opponent back. Bounce spells are one thing, but bounce creatures are another because they add power to your board while taking power away from your opponents, and that's usually a very good deal. Also, this is kind of a corner case as well, since discard spells aren't huge, but every now and then you can bounce a creature and use a discard spell in conjunction to get rid of that creature. There are a couple of discard 2s in this format, so I don't think it's completely irrelevant, even though I don't think that's going to come up very often because that would put you into 3 colors since discard spells are usually black. But yeah, Reflector Mage is absolutely amazing. Fantastic card, the type of card that I'm willing to first pick very, very often, and the type of card that I think is really disappointing when you open it up and there's also some crazy rare in the pack, because you always want the Reflector Mages, but I think this card's fantastic. Alright, the Damier card here is Mind Melter. So even without an ability, this is a 2/2 unblockable, which I think is fine. It doesn't have ingest, so it's not as synergistic as like Benthic Infiltrator, but it does get in unblockable damage, so it's a repeated source of damage that your opponent can't do very much about without removing the creature. This one costs 3, by the way, same as Benthic Infiltrator, except you're pushing in more damage. We also have the activated ability here, ability for 3 and a colorless, that says target opponent exiles a card from his or her hand. You can only activate it at sorcery speed. That seems pretty good. There are times that you're not going to play it, and it's definitely a late game ability. I don't think very often you're going to go turn 3 this, start attacking, and just start triggering this ability out of the blue, even though stripping your opponent of cards early in the game can be pretty decent, especially if they mulliganed and you're just punishing them for having less cards in their hand to begin with. But yeah, this reminds me of, I believe it's Damier Guild Mage from Ravnica, and I think it was reprinted in Modern Masters 15. Obviously not as versatile as Damier Guild Mage, but the discard spell is relevant, and it does exile as well, so it's not like your opponent's getting that back. I think the appeal here really is the 2/2 unblockable, and I think the ability is upside on that, but I think altogether this makes Mind Melter a very playable card. Not nearly as exciting as Reflector Mage or some of the other cards on this list, but definitely a playable card by all means. Also, probably the most interesting name I've ever encountered on a Magic card. That is absolutely not true. Flayer Drone, this card is kind of a powerhouse. It's also 3 mana for a 3/1 in Rakdos color. So 1 black and red for a 3/1 first striker, which is just very strong in combat early in the game. For 3/1 first strikers just pushing damage very easily because there aren't very many things that can jump in front of it without just getting eaten. Whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent loses 1 life. So the obvious connection here is to something like Nettle Drone, where you get this damage in for using colorless cards, but you don't necessarily have to send this in combat. The difference between this and Nettle Drone, other than this being an uncommon and costing a different color, is that this thing not only deals that extra damage, but attacks well, and its abilities triggering even if you're attacking with it, whereas Nettle Drone has to tap and can no longer attack, or if it attacks, it's not going to untap, or not going to be available to tap unless you play another colorless spell. So if you play this on turn 3, you're very likely getting in damage on the next turn, and if you're playing it in a dedicated deck with lots of devoid cards or just general colorless cards, it can account for quite a bit of damage over the course of a game. So a very early pick as well, in very good colors in the set, and I think it's going to be very annoying when my opponent plays this on the other side of the field. You can't block it well, and it's just going to get in this passive damage without even having to come into combat. Not to mention that it's going to be encouraged to get into combat anyway. So yeah, it's a very solid pick here in Flayer Drone. My opinion, probably the most unexciting card on this list is Relentless Hunter, because it's in red-green, but it doesn't really do anything landfall-y. It doesn't do anything really at all synergistic with anything, so it's kind of a weird card. It's not an ally, it's just a random human warrior, but it's still a solid card on its own, so if you're playing red-green, this still fits into the deck. It's just, it seems weird that it doesn't have anything really interesting to do with the set, no cohort, nothing like that. I think it could have at least been an ally, but what we get here is a 3 mana, 1 green red for a 3/3, and for the same cost as an activated ability, this thing gets +1/+1 in trample until end of turn. So starting on turn 4, you can start attacking for 4 damage with trample, and the ability does stack in the late game, even though in the late game an extra +1/+1 is not going to do too much in addition to just being a 4/4, but the ability is very strong on a card that's just fine by itself. I've already mentioned in one of my videos that 3/3s for 3 are very good and limited, and it reminds me of Grow Rumbler, or whatever the I don't actually know the card, the red-green card from Battle for Zendikar. Just you can build a very aggressive deck, a very strong deck with red and green cards. Even though I don't like green very much in the set, as I've expressed, I think this card is solid, and I'd be happy to pick it if I ended up in those colors. It's not one that I'm going to pick up and then try to go red-green. It's just one I'm going to pick up if I already am red-green. Moving forward, we get Girag Auxiliary. This is a 3 mana 2/3, which I feel like all the creatures in the set started as 3 mana 2/3s, and they were adjusted accordingly. But this time you get Selesnya colors, green, white, and 1 for a 2/3, and for 6 mana, 1 white, 1 green, you get support 2. Now that costs a lot, and people are often put off by effects that cost a lot and don't seem to do too much. But in late game, this makes this card relevant. And it's already a relevant card in the early game, so there are times that you're just going to run this out on turn 3, and it's going to be a little bit unexciting, and it's just going to kind of sit there. Maybe it doesn't even block very well. Maybe it doesn't attack very well, depending on the board state, but then turn 6 comes around and suddenly you're pumping your creatures 2 counters every turn, and that does add up over the course of a game. This one is an ally, and this exactly highlights my problem with the previous card. Like, why does the green white get an ally and a relevant ability, whereas the one before is just kind of like this self-centered creature? Anyway, Girag Auxiliary is going to play in all of your green-white decks, and it's going to be good there. So, again, not a Reflector Mage, not a Flayer Drone type card, not something I'm going to push myself in the green-white for, but a definite reward that you might be able to pick up if you're already in green and white. Cliffhaven Vampire. This one costs 4, so we actually have to pay an extra mana for a gold card. This one's a 2/4 flyer, though, which those are pretty solid stats. Actually, those are very good on a flyer. A lot of cards sometimes just cost 4 for a 2/4 on the ground. But here you get a flyer that's very hard to block, and whenever you gain a life, each opponent loses a life. That's very good. There are a lot of incidental life gain cards, not to mention just cards that you can easily build around to gain life. This is as good as, if not better than, Drana's Emissary, which was already a very, very solid card for 1 less mana. Very kind of similar effect, not really the same, but they stack together. This is an ally, this is a vampire, this is a solid flyer. This is just an altogether great card. One thing I did read today from the release notes for this card that is relevant for Two-Headed Giant, that is that if you, or for example, if your partner controls this card and... am I thinking of a different card? I'm not sure what I'm actually talking about here, but oh yeah, whenever if you control Cliffhaven Vampire and your partner gains life, it does not count as you gaining life, even though your whole team's life total goes up. So this isn't like a busted card in Two-Headed Giant or anything like that if you're both playing life gain, but it's still just as solid in Two-Headed Giant as it is in 1v1, and this I think falls in the former category of multicolor cards where you draft this and then you want to play white-black, as opposed to like the green-white card where you want to already be in the colors before you get the card. I think this is a very high incentive to play white-black because of the power level of the card, and it's just an altogether solid card. Not very much else I can say about that. Moving on, this card has a lot of buzz about it. Stormchaser Mage is 1 blue, 1 red, for a flying, haste, and prowess, a 1/3. So there's a lot of abilities on a 2-mana card. It's attacking right away, even though if you play this on curve, it's not really prowessing or doing anything busted that turn. But in a spell-heavy deck, this can deal a lot of damage. It becomes a very strong flyer. It's kind of hard to kill since prowess kind of adds a layer of protection from certain types of removal, and the flying here is the real big difference between the card I'm comparing it to and the very obvious comparison in Monastery Swiftspear. The Swiftspear obviously has made its waves in Standard and Modern, but in my opinion, and you can disagree with me on this, Khans of Tarkir was a pretty fast format due to cards like Trumpet Blast and Hordeling Outburst and just very efficient, fast aggro decks. But I don't think Monastery Mentor was a very good card in draft. It kind of falls into the trap of looking very good but only really being amazing on turn 1 and being very mediocre on turn 2 through X, where X is the last turn. But Swiftspear was not, in my opinion, a great draft card, and the appeal to picking Swiftspear is that I could get a couple bucks off of it. Stormchaser Mage, I think, is probably a little bit better in draft than Swiftspear. Not to mention Stormchaser also fits in the Surge deck, which kind of encourages you to play multiple spells per turn, even though a lot of those are going to be creature spells. I think Stormchaser can push in a lot of damage, and a 1/3 flyer with haste kind of is decent already, even though I don't love 1/3 flyers, but the fact that it has haste means that it's hitting right away. I think Stormchaser is better in its own respective colors than Swiftspear will be, or would have been in Khans of Tarkir, but it remains to be seen how that plays out in Limited. I'm not even going to speculate on this card's potential in Constructed because I think it's actually very, very good, but I'll leave the experts to that. I know I'm going to take a lot of them because they're probably going to be worth something, but I think it's better than Swiftspear. That's my ultimate judgment on this card. Weapons Trainer is our Boros Align 1, red and white for a 3/2. I know this is 3/2 again, instead of a 2/3, but other creatures you control, I guess this is a 3/2 for 2, not for 3, so there you go. Other creatures you control get +1/+0 as long as you control an equipment. Apparently red-white is the equipment colors. I don't know. I guess I kind of saw that, but remember, equipment decks have my vote for the deck that's not getting there. If somebody plays a quote-unquote equipment deck, I don't think they're going to win very many games. The support's just not really that good. Now, this card is solid as just a 2-mana 3/2. That's very strong for 2 mana, and if you're trying to really just build an aggressive deck, then you want these. Also, it is an ally, and red-white are kind of the ally colors, with the other ones just kind of being backup colors. So I'm not going to force an equipment to make this guy any better. I don't think there's very many playable equipments in the format, but if you have the incidental equipment, this ability is just that much better, making it a little bit more relevant in the late game when you already have a board presence, since you kind of wanted to get this down on turn 2 and just beating with it. I don't think 3/2s are that much better than just 3/1s, but in a format where scions are just floating around and everything comes attached with an extra 1/1. 3/2s are that much better. So I think Weapons Trainer is a very solid card. I'm kind of in the middle on how early you would pick this. I don't think I'm going to grab Weapons Trainer in a pack with some equivalent uncommon cards and then try to force red-white. But as with all the other cards, if you're already red-white, then I think you're super happy to see Weapons Trainer come around. And I believe this is the last color, maybe not. No, it's not. VoidGrafter is our Simic card here. 1 blue and green for a 2/4 flash. That's already fantastic. Wow, 3 mana for a 2/4 flash is great. Flash is just one of my favorite abilities on cards. Blue-green is a great color combination that I love to play. And yeah, that's very solid. We also get the upside here. When VoidGrafter enters the battlefield, another target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. I think that's just that's a very fine upside, and sometimes you get a card out of it. I think sometimes people fall into the same kind of trap as they do with Mistweaver, where they're losing out on damage because they're trying to hold up the ability to get somebody with it. A lot of times I saw Mistweaver just kind of... and I did the same thing. Just kind of leave Mistweaver face down and keep it face down so that you can blank an opponent's removal spell or something like that. Whereas you could have flipped Mistfire Weaver up, or you could be attacking with VoidGrafter or blocking with VoidGrafter, and you can just get in that extra damage or prevent that extra damage. So don't try to get too cute with the ability here, because the card itself is very solid. But if you do happen to get something, you blank a removal spell with the ability, then that's just like the card justifies itself even that much more. I think it's going to fit into any deck that can support the 2 colors without having to struggle for mana. And this, in my opinion, this is the type of card that pushes me into these 2 colors. Where same as Skyrider Elf. People were so hesitant to play green, but if you got a Skyrider Elf, the card was just so strong that blue-green seemed like the best color combination, and you just splash a couple other colors. Alright, now this I think is the last one, and it's a pretty good one. We have the Golgari colors. This is black and green and 4, so this is definitely the most expensive one here. 6 mana for a 4/5 zombie beast. When Baloth Null enters the battlefield, return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So Dutiful Return is kind of a very sucky card. It is a 2-for-1, but it costs 4 mana, and then you usually don't get to do anything the turn of. Usually doesn't make the cut, but when it comes attached to a sizable creature for only 2 more mana than the sorcery would cost, then we're talking business. Baloth Null is fantastic if you're playing these 2 colors, or if you can even splash it. I think this is the type of card you would splash, or you would be very happy to splash maybe a couple black sources or a couple green sources, so you can throw this in. Just getting a huge creature plus basically drawing 2 very specific cards, and you know that they're going to be relevant cards, is very good. And like I said, if I can play the colors, then this is fantastic, and I'm very happy to see it in my black-green decks. And I believe that's the last one before we move into these legendary creatures. We have 3 legendary creatures, all gold cards with 2 different colored mana. All fitting into kind of very different decks. So the first one here is Orzhov colors. This is a core cleric, and I was reading this is actually the first black-white legendary creature that's existed, and clerics are generally black-white cards. There are tons of other clerics that have black and white in them, but they're usually a 3rd color if they're legendary. But here we have Ailey, Eternal Pilgrim, and just a lot of stuff going on here. First off, all abilities aside, this is a 2/3 Death Touch for 2. That is fantastic. Very hard to block profitably, and very it discourages your opponent from attacking you, as it eats up 2/2s incredibly well. It just does lots of stuff for that mana cost. It comes down early. Hopefully, if you're drafting it, you can get it on turn 2. Sometimes you might have to wait for that 2nd color, but let's look at the abilities. The first one says, for 1 mana and sacking another creature, you gain life equal to the sacked creature's toughness. So there are not too many huge creatures with lots of toughness. I'm thinking cards like Fortified Rampart and Wall of Resurgence. They can gain you a lot of life. Overall, this ability here is probably there just to kind of fuel the second ability, but remember you can always use this in response to your opponent's removal, or if you have a creature that's about to die in combat, you can use this to turn that creature into life since you're going to lose it anyway. Stuff like that. Eternal Pilgrim just kind of gains you life on the sly here in certain situations. Sometimes that ability won't be relevant depending on your deck, but it's definitely for 1 mana and such a low cost and a potential upside for the second ability that's definitely worth having there. The second ability says, for 1 white and black, sacrifice another creature, and after all those costs, you exile target non-land permanent. Any permanent that's not a land. Pretty crazy. The stipulation here is that you can only activate it if you have at least 10 more life than your starting life total. So in two-headed giant games, that means that you can only activate this ability if you have 40 or more life. In Commander, you can only activate it when you have 50 or more. And in normal games, you have to have at least 30 life before you can activate it. Now, once you do activate it, once you triggered the ability, if your opponent tries to respond by dealing damage to you and bringing your life total below that amount, it doesn't stop it. Once you've activated the ability, the effect is happening regardless of what your opponent does. But that's a huge, very powerful effect. Sacrifice a creature, not a non-token creature, but any creature, and exile any non-land permanent. Exile your opponent's best creature, exile an enchantment that's getting in the way, anything like that. Not to mention how much easier it is to gain 10 life in Two-Headed Giant. Although I guess the caveat there is that it's also easier to lose 10 life in Two-Headed Giant. But this card just does tons and tons of stuff, and there's a lot of buzz about it in Commander and so on and so forth. And I don't really know what to say about it because I feel like it's the type of card where the abilities just justify the power level. It's definitely there, and 2 mana just seems insane for this. I think if you were going to make a format where every other creature is a 3 mana 2/3, you would see this at 3 mana, but no, this is 2, and why not give it Death Touch? Why not make it trade with anything in addition to its pretty insane abilities? So yeah, Ayleigh Eternal Pilgrim is a first pickable card and the type of card that I really want to be activating that second ability, so I would prioritize life gain cards a lot higher. Second up, we have Jorian, Ruin Diver. This is it fits into our quote-unquote storm decks, but it's just solid red-blue card anyway. So yeah, 3 mana 2/3, because why not, right? But 1 blue, 1 red, 1, and you get a merfolk creature. This is a red-blue merfolk creature for anyone who was craving that. I don't know if that's a thing people want or not, but relevant creature type in certain formats. Anyway, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, draw a card. This is on your turn, your opponent's turn, or if you're in multiplayer game, every person's turn. You get to draw a card if you've cast 2 spells that turn. It doesn't stack after that, same as the red enchantment that we saw. After your second spell, it doesn't matter how many other spells you cast, you're only getting that 1 card per turn, but that seems pretty good. It incentivizes me to take very cheap instants, very cheap sorceries a lot higher, cantrips a lot higher, and I think the stats are just fine on a creature that has the potential to draw you, 3, 4, 5 extra cards in a game. That kind of card draw is very good. There are times where, your hand's expensive or you just have an expensive curve, so you can't really trigger Jorian very often, but I think the red-blue decks are designed to kind of go off with cheaper cards, hence Surge and things like that. But yeah, Jorian is definitely making it into a lot of decks. I think this is a very exciting card, and I'm very unique ability for Limited, so I'm happy to see it, and I will be happy to see it in any packs that I open. And finally, we have our last card altogether, and definitely last multicolor card. This is Mina and Den Wildborn. My guess is that this dude back here is Mina, but no, not really. Anyway, this is a 4 mana, red, green, and 2 for a 4/4. So good stats, 4 4s for 4, along the lines of 3 3s for 3. They're very strong. We have Elf Ally, and I don't know, most of the Elf and ally creatures also have a 3rd type, so Elf Ally looks kind of weird sitting next to each other, but like that. But two pretty good abilities. The first one says you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Those are pretty good in Limited. Of course, this is not Courser of Kruphix. It doesn't just let you filter lands off the top of your decks. And it's not Oracle Moldiah either. So it just gives you the extra land drops. It doesn't let you, turbo off lands from your decks or, stuff like that. So it's not completely busted. It's just a good rampy type ability. But it plays very well with the second ability, which is an activated ability. The cost is red and green, and return a land you control to its owner's hand. Target creature gains trample until end of turn. Now, this is good for a couple reasons. First off, you can float mana off the land that you're returning, and then return it to your hand and give a creature trample, which essentially means this costs 1 because you can replay that land for the turn, or you could replay 2, or you could play 2 lands for turn. So say you don't even have a land drop for the turn, you can just float green, float red, and then bounce that Forest and Mountain to your hand, replay both of them, and you kind of got a free trampler for the turn. And Mina and Den is a good target for trample as is. It's going to come down usually a turn earlier than most of your opponent's equivalent threats, so it kind of it gets damage in a little bit quicker. It's going to have a little bit of trouble pushing through later in the game, I think, just because in a format full of huge creatures, 4/4 gets a little overclassed in the late game. One thing to note is the interaction between Trample and Death Touch is very, very good. So if for some reason you're playing this alongside lots of Death Touch creatures, giving things Trample is great. Also, this is in landfall colors, and while there aren't really... There's only 2 landfall cards in Oath of the Gatewatch, you still have Battle for Zendikar, so this lets you trigger landfall twice, which is fantastic. Or, trigger it once, activate the ability, return that land, and play that land again. Just getting 2 landfall triggers while having a relevant ability is great. I'm thinking of Grove Rumbler again, where you can give it +4/+4 very easily in one turn and have a 7/7 trampler. But yeah, Mina and Den is going to fit into all of your red-green decks. I think it's first pickable, and you're going to try and draft red-green, but I don't think the card is so busted or anything like that you have to force red-green if you start getting past like good black or blue cards, because I don't think red-green is going to be the premier deck of the format. I just think it's going to be a solid beat 'em up kind of deck with huge threats. But yeah, that's it for Oath of the Gatewatch. That's it for the gold cards here. All of the gold cards are good. Some of them aren't as worthy of first picks as others, but at least all the legendary cards I think are, and I think that's a good sign that we're going to have a healthy, diverse format. But yeah, let me know what you thought of all my reviews. Let me know if I should keep doing them, or if you have any cards that you think I'm underrated and overrated, and so on and so forth. And I hope everybody has a fun pre-release. I'm recording this on a Thursday, so I'm really excited to hit the midnight pre-release tomorrow, and I'll be playing it all weekend. So I'll keep it now. I'll have a better idea of the cards that I've given my opinion about and how I feel the colors work, at least in sealed, and then I'm huge on drafts, so I'll be drafting it as much as possible. But there you go. Oath of the Gatewatch, multicolor cards. Let me know your opinions, comment, and subscribe, and you will see me soon for some more videos.